The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. In 1900, the world looked at Africa and saw a silent continent with only about 140 million people. We were 9% of the world's population. By 1950, that number was 250 million. But listen to the heartbeat of 2026. Thinkers like Jeffrey Sachs have sounded the alarm. We are now 1.5 billion people. We are 18% of the world. By the end of this century, 50% of human life will be African. A single bracelet does not jangle, but when the arms of a billion people move together, the sound is like thunder. Why are we 18% of the people but only 3% of the world's GDP? Because our leaders have Washington ears and Brussels tongues. Let us read the history that they want you to forget. In December 2022, President Nana Akufo-Addo sat in Washington and whispered to the headmaster. He gossiped that his brother, Captain Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso, had hired Wagner mercenaries. Instead of a brother's handshake, he gave a brother's secrets to a stranger. He sought political points in America while his own brother, his own borders were burning. And yet, months later in 2023, he had to visit Ouagadougou to apologize because in the end, geography is stronger than gossip.
Where does Africa fit into this? Let me start with the basic demographics. In 1950, Africa was 9% of the world population, around 250 million people in a world of 2.5 to 3 billion people. Today, Africa is 18% of the world population, twice the share of what it was in 1950, with 1.4 billion people. Today, Africa has the same population as China and India. But while China is now at a peak and is in population decline, that will be quite significant, by the way, during this century, so that China's population by the end of the 21st century will be under 1 billion people, maybe even below 800 million people. And India's population will stabilize at something like 1.7 billion people. Africa's population is so young that there is a tremendous population growth built in to Africa till the end of the century. So Africa's population will be 2.5 billion people at mid-century. That means around 25% of the world population. So from 9% to 18% today to 25% at mid-century. And at least on current trajectory, I think it's probably not correct, but on the current extrapolation, with a gradually declining fertility rate, Africa reaches about 3.7 billion people by the end of the 21st century. And that is about 35% of the world population. It may not reach that level because the fertility rate, in my view, will come down more rapidly than what is in this medium forecast of the UN. But Africa's population will reach 3 billion people. And that means that Africa will be a third of the world population, up from 9% in 1950. What about the economics? We are in a golden age of technology right now. We are in the most amazing acceleration of technological know-how in history. Everything has accelerated. If you launch ChatGPT 1 month, within the next month there are 100 million users. Within 6 months, there are 500 million users. We've never had an uptake of technology at this speed in history. So if this technological know-how is properly utilized, the ability of Africa to achieve what China achieved, double-digit growth for 4 decades, is absolutely realistic. This is the main point. Africa can achieve a dramatic advance. What is happening in this city in Addis Ababa, which is exactly that kind of double-digit growth, so that if you come, as we do, each year to the AU Summit, you see a city transformed from one year to the next. That can be Africa's general reality, not only in Addis Ababa, but across the continent. And incidentally, Africa's growth will be urban-based growth. Africa today is maybe 40 or 45% urban, although we have to be very careful on definitions, because what is urban and what is rural is somewhat arbitrary in definition. And a lot of rural areas are really pretty urban already, with a lot of non-agricultural employment. But Africa will be 60 or 70% urban by around 2060 or 2070. And the basic reason, by the way, is that agriculture will be mechanized everywhere. Don't think that rising agricultural productivity means better jobs in agriculture. It means an elimination of jobs in agriculture, as it has everywhere in the world. In the US, which has the most advanced agriculture in the world, together with Canada, we have 1% of our population in agriculture. And Africa's share of the population in agriculture will decline to below 10%, probably within 30 or 40 years. And that means an urban Africa, and that means what you're observing in Addis Ababa, that will be true all over Africa. So think about the big cities and the regional cities. They will be the growth poles for this rapid economic development. What will it take for Africa to achieve this kind of dynamism? Basically, be like China or be like India. Unified, integrated structure, continental scale economy with a continental scale policy and plan. That's what it will take. If you have to do this 55 times, it won't work. And if you have to do this 55 times, once for each of the member states of the AU, by that time you will be picked apart by the other powers. Africa will just become a divided corpse. So we'll do an autopsy in 40 years, not Africa at the center of the world economy. So Africa, first and foremost, needs to think at a continental scale and operate at a continental scale. And one of the reasons why I'm optimistic is that's happening. Yes, too slowly. It's frustrating. But there truly, really is an African continental free trade area. It's real. It's going to become more real. It could be operationalized a lot faster. It should be operationalized a lot faster. If my colleague, Dr. Hippolyte Fofak, who was chief economist of Frexim Bank, gets his way, there will be an African Union currency. One currency for the continent. This is the right idea. This is practicable within the next 10 to 20 years. Really practicable. And absolutely the right thing to do to make a continental scale economy. The second thing that Africa needs is, well, the second, third, and fourth is investment, investment, and investment. Three kinds of investment. Most important, please, every child on this continent should complete at least upper secondary school with real learning. So figure out how to do that. Give me a call. I have some ideas as well. Every child should have a device in their hand to be connected online. It can be a tablet, it can be a computer, it can be a smartphone, but they need to watch their classes online. They need to do assignments online. They need to have their AI personalized tutor helping them with that math problem online. It's virtually free to do this if you actually work out the capital costs. There should be no limits of teachers in rural areas or teachers that are underqualified or can't do a math problem, because we don't need the traditional delivery as the only delivery of education right now. We're in a digital world. You can leapfrog. Be creative, be inventive, but take the basic idea. Don't let the budget constraint stand in the way of universal quality education. It's by far the #1 resource of this continent, and it's growing very rapidly. And there is no demographic dividend of a young population if it is not educated. None at all, only a burden. The only demographic dividend is if all those young people have a proper education. So please figure out how to do this. And the education minister, the finance minister, the minister for digital technologies need to huddle together and say, how are we going to get this done? And one basic idea that I believe in is if you need to borrow long-term, find a 40-year loan from China or from the Gulf or other places to fill a financing gap, and then tell the kids, we're going to educate you, and when you are adults, you're going to have decent jobs, and wherever you're going to be, you're going to pay a 10% payroll tax because we educated you. So we're going to collect for your education, not in an onerous way, but in a way so that we can finance you today. Because I know the finance ministers of this continent, and they're responsible, and they say, we don't have a budget, Mr. Sachs, for universal education. And they go to the IMF, and the IMF doesn't think straight. And they say, so sorry, maybe you can't get all the kids in school. That's a shame. That is not the answer. The answer is all the kids are going to be in school, and we're going to figure out how to do it. And by the way, that's almost half the population of Africa. This has to be a whole continent in learning right now. This is a continent with a 19-year median age. Half the kids are at school age. I mean, half the population is at school age in this continent. Make sure they're learning. And then you get the transformation beyond anything we can dream today. The second major investment is physical infrastructure. And of course, that entails the power sector, the transport sector, the digital sector, social housing, water and sanitation. The key infrastructure. There needs to be an Africa-wide strategy that reaches down to every part of the continent. The power sector should tap your wind, solar, hydro, geothermal. This continent has enough high-quality solar to power the entire world, as you know. We've all seen the little box in the Sahara that has enough solar energy to power the entire world. Let me tell you, China has the solar module capacity to make Africa the solar power capital of the world. In other words, China's productive capacity is about 1,300 gigawatts of solar modules a year, but they're only producing half of that right now because that's where the demand is right now. So my proposal is Africa says, we'll be the rest of the demand, thank you. Give us long-term financing. We take the solar capacity. We electrify all of Africa. And in rural areas, we do it on microgrids or individual homesteads. People can take their solar modules with them when they go to the cities. We can do this throughout the entire continent in the next 10 years. And I'm asking the Chinese leadership, support Africa in a China-Africa partnership for complete electrification of this continent in the coming 10 years. And one can think about the same in digital, in transport, in hydrogen. We don't have to wait 30 years or 50 years. We don't have to be on an IMF timetable. We can be on an expedited double-digit growth timetable for the next 40 years. If you do this and you project forward, Africa becomes, by the end of this century at least, roughly a third of the world economy. That's good. Today it's 5% of the world economy. It can be around 1/3 of the world economy by the end of this century. And you look at a map, that's the center of the world. And that's a good thing. And that's what we should aim for. And that will mean for Africa a unified strategy, investment, 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 and strategic partnerships with all who want to be strategic partners with Africa. That will be China, that should be India, that should be the Arab countries, especially the Gulf countries, who should not be putting their money into the United States, but should be putting their money into Africa where the returns will be much higher. I hope it will be the United States once we get out of our current disorder. I call it America's cultural revolution, but that will pass. We will return to what we are, which is a diverse, wonderfully diverse society. We live in New York. My wife and I, we love New York. We even hear English once in a while. We love our Ethiopian restaurant on Amsterdam Avenue. We like the diversity. That's America, not Mr. Trump. So we're hoping we get back to that because that's the truth of the United States. And that's the best part of the United States. I hope there will be a Europe that is functional in the future. Europe is destroying itself through Russophobia right now. This is the main self-inflicted wound. If Mr. Merz would pick up the phone and call Mr. Putin, or I want to encourage Mr. Putin to pick up the phone and call Chancellor Merz, and they could have a good discussion and calm things down and stop this hatred that is escalating right now, this would work. And if anyone really wants to understand Russian history, they will understand that Russia did not invade Europe. Europe invaded Russia multiple times, and shame. It's time to end this. And there never would have been a Cold War, by the way, had Franklin Roosevelt not had a stroke on April 12, 1945, because he understood how to cooperate with Stalin, and there would have been peace, and there would have been a demilitarized Germany at the heart of Europe, and there never would have been an occupation of Eastern Europe by the Soviet Union, because there would have been a solution, not a Cold War. But unfortunately, the vision of peace was overridden by the U.S. military-industrial complex. And that's what did us in. But now Europe is doing this in a self-inflicted way because it doesn't even understand how the U.S. led Europe into this trap. So I'm hoping that there will be a Europe that is as great as it is, because it's cradle of Western civilization. It's 450 million people. It's got the highest living standards in the world, and the last thing it needs to do is to march off to war.
Today, politicians in Ghana use the death of tomato traders in Titao to score cheap political points. They claim that inviting Traore to an inauguration invited terrorists. Wake up! Did the terrorists wait for an invitation? They have been at our door for 10 years because we are divided. To the minister and the MP, you are using the blood of the market women to win an election. If you want traders to be safe, you don't fight the brother who is protecting the farm. You pick up again and stand beside him. To move from 18% population to 18% power, we must build on the 3 pillars of agency. Pillar 1, value addition. We must stop being resource deport. If we have 18% of the people, we must have 18% of the factories. We export raw gold and import jewelry. We export crude oil and import petrol. This is the economics of a slave. Pillar 2, infrastructure sovereignty. We must stop the madness where it is cheaper to ship from London to Ghana than to drink a drink from Accra to Burkina Faso. We need the rails and roads to connect the 18%. Pillar 3, educational agency. Turn the youth bulge into a skills bulge. If we don't educate the 18%, they will become the fuel for other people's engine. Cheap labor to the oppressor, just like they use their visas as a tool to continue to export the African into slavery. The civil rights of the 1960s was about right to be a human. The civil rights of 2026 is about the right to be a superpower. Africa is not moving forward because we have leaders who are afraid of the strength of their own brothers. It is time to stop fearing the man in the red beret and start fearing the silence between us. Until the lion has his own storyteller, the hunter will always be the hero. As Africans, until we start telling our own narrative, we'll continue to be where we are. If we continue to be doing the same old stories like talk in African Union, SADC, ECOWAS, ANC, and the rest of the unions, we will continue to be where we are because we don't expect to be doing the same old thing and expect a different result. Like the president of Zambia, Hakainde Hichilema, rightfully said that we need to reform that organization called Africa Union, because we cannot reform our regional blocks while the main African Union is still using the old 2020 what century archaic things to be doing in this 2026. We cannot continue to be doing the same old things and expect different results. And African Union needs to be reformed, because this organization, as we are seeing it now, is not an organization that is fighting for the interests of the people. How can we have an organization that is fighting for the size of a map instead of fighting to protect the people? How can we have an organization that's supposed to be fighting for the unity of the people, rather placing sanctions on their leaders in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso for fighting for their total liberation, saying no to these our oppressors coming into the continent to be taking the resources, nationalizing their resources, building roads, uniting with a common army, having their own flag. What these our leaders sit in African Union to be preaching for decades, these leaders are using just 2-3 years to achieve them. And African Union is rather putting sanctions on these leaders instead of putting sanctions on politicians who always go to IMF and World Bank to borrow, but use the money for Kenke party and other things that they can never account for. And these are the leaders that are praised by the West. And any leader, if you are in a country and the West are praising your leader, you should know your leader isn't doing your bid. We cannot continue to be growing in population while we are powerless among the rest of the races. And until you stop talking as leaders and start acting, we'll continue to be this way. Numbers isn't what we need. We need the power. Look at Britain, as small as it is, controls and even came down to colonize us. Numbers isn't what we are looking for. The power is all that we need. Like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso uniting to give us the power. The African deserve to lead the world, but we can never do that when we do not have the power. And that is why, as we are growing in numbers, we need the power. People cannot use our resources to gain power and still intimidate us. We need to use that resources to our benefit. We can allow the people who have nothing to be living like kings, while we that have everything that's supposed to be living like kings are rather living like beggars. We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world and in the United States of America.